In the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, stretching across more than 165 million square kilometers, there is an island with a total population of just 40 people. There is no airport, no hotel, and no supermarket. To set foot here, you first have to spend several days at sea from another island, then transfer to a small boat and battle through heavy swells just to reach the shore. This is Pitcairn, one of the smallest permanent communities on Earth. And what you're about to see will reveal what life is really like for the 40 people who call this remote island home. Pitcairn is the only inhabited island in the Pitcairn Islands, a British overseas territory. On a world map, it's easy to miss. The island covers just about 4.6 square kilometers, far smaller than many towns on the mainland. It lies more than 2,100 kilometers southeast of Tahiti and over 5,500 kilometers from New Zealand. This extreme isolation raises an obvious question. How has a community managed to survive in a place like this? With a population of just around 40, Pitcairn is one of the least populated inhabited territories in the world. That's fewer people than you'd find in many mountain villages, or even a single neighborhood in a modern city. And yet, remarkably, this tiny community still maintains its own local government, a school, basic health care, and the essential services and social activities needed to keep everyday life going. Behind Pitcairn's survival lies a remarkable story of history. In the late 18th century, the mutineers of the HMS Bounty, along with a group of Tahitians, came to this remote island seeking refuge, laying the foundations for the Pitcairn community that exists today. More than 2 centuries later, the descendants of those first settlers still call this island home, carrying on the legacy of the community they built. Today, satellite internet has connected Pitcairn to the outside world more quickly than ever before. But the rhythm of island life has changed very little. People still wake to the sound of the waves, check the weather before heading out to sea, repair their own homes, tend small gardens, and wait for supply ships to appear on the horizon. Here, nature still determines much of what happens from one day to the next. So, what has allowed this community to survive for more than 2 centuries? Let's begin at the place every resident of Pitcairn calls home, Adamstown. All 40 residents of the island live in Adamstown, Pitcairn's only settlement, making it one of the smallest inhabited settlements on Earth where everyday life still carries on. In here, the very idea of a neighbor almost seems to disappear, because everyone is connected as family, friends, or relatives. People know each other's names, their families, their jobs, and even the history behind each home on the island. A child born today will grow up under the watchful eyes of the entire community, and when an elderly resident passes away, it's not just one family that feels the loss. It's a grief shared by the whole island. This sense of connection is rooted in the very history of Pitcairn's founding. Over generations, family ties have become deeply intertwined, making this community feel more like one big extended family than an ordinary village. That's why life in Adamstown is built more on cooperation than competition. Here, helping one another isn't considered a special gesture. It's simply part of everyday life. Everyone understands that on a remote island in the middle of the ocean, there will come a time when each person needs the help of someone else. Childhood on the island is different too. There are no crowded playgrounds or bustling shopping malls. Instead, childhood in Adamstown is shaped by nature. Children attend a small school together and grow up alongside friends they've known since they first learned to walk. After school, rather than spending hours staring at phone screens, they often ride bicycles along the village's steep roads, explore the surrounding forests, go fishing with their parents, or help their families tend the garden. In a community this small, everyone wears many hats. Someone might serve on the local council one day, pilot a boat to meet a supply ship the next, then spend the weekend helping repair a road or organize an island event. There are few clear lines between a person's job and their responsibilities to the community. Everyone contributes in some way to keeping island life running. But living in such a small community comes with its own challenges. Privacy is hard to come by. News travels quickly because everyone knows everyone else. And when disagreements arise, it's almost impossible for them not to affect the wider community. That's why respect, patience, and a willingness to make peace have become essential to keeping Adamstown united across generations. But for this tiny community to survive in the middle of the ocean, connection alone isn't enough. Everything from food and fuel to building materials depends on one place, the Bounty Bay, the gateway to the outside world and the lifeline of Pitcairn itself. Bounty Bay is little more than a narrow cove surrounded by volcanic rock. Waves from the South Pacific constantly crash against the shoreline, leaving the water rarely still. The rugged terrain makes it impossible for large ships to come directly ashore. Instead, they anchor hundreds of meters offshore, while all passengers and cargo are transferred to specialized aluminum boats operated by the people of Pitcairn themselves. It's a job that nearly every adult man on the island has taken part in at least once in his life. When a supply ship appears on the horizon, nearly everyone in Adamstown knows about it almost immediately. Residents quickly make their way down to Bounty Bay, checking boat engines, preparing ropes and life jackets, and assigning everyone a role. They all understand that they have only a narrow window of time to get the job done before the sea conditions change. Transferring cargo may sound simple enough, but as the small boats move alongside a ship rising and falling with the waves, that's when the skill and experience of the boat operators truly come into play. Misjudge the rhythm of the swell by even a little, and the boat could slam hard against the ship's steel hull. Every approach requires precise coordination between the boat operator and the crew on board. One by one, fuel drums, bags of cement, building supplies, frozen food, medicine, and packages sent from the other side of the world are passed down into the waiting boats. Then, the small vessels make their way back through the breaking surf, carrying everything safely to the tiny landing at Bounty Bay. But on Pitcairn, every item makes a journey of thousands of kilometers across the ocean before it reaches its destination. That's why people here have to plan far ahead. Spare parts for a tractor may be ordered months in advance. Prescription medicine for chronic conditions has to be stocked well enough to last until the next supply ship arrives. A small mistake in planning can sometimes mean waiting several more weeks or even months. The sea doesn't just bring supplies to the island. It also provides the most important source of food for the entire community. Whenever the weather is favorable, small boats leave Bounty Bay early in the morning, heading toward the deep waters surrounding Pitcairn. Just a few kilometers from shore, the seafloor drops thousands of meters, creating an ideal environment for a wide variety of ocean fish. Yellowfin tuna, wahoo, swordfish, and other pelagic species appear throughout the year, providing a steady source of fresh food for the island. Fishing on Pitcairn is rarely an industrial operation. Most people catch only what they need for their families or enough to share with their neighbors. If someone brings in more fish than they can use, the natural thing to do is take some next door. In a community of just a few dozen people, there is little point in stockpiling more than you need for yourself. Whether they want to travel to a nearby island, welcome visitors, or take part in scientific research expeditions, the people of Pitcairn depend on the sea for everything. There is no alternative. If the waves grow too high or the winds become too strong, every plan has to be put on hold, no matter how carefully it was prepared. That's why the people of Pitcairn have developed a habit that would be unfamiliar to most city dwellers. Before making almost any decision, they look out at the sea. Is the water calm today? Which way is the wind shifting? How high will the waves be this afternoon? These questions matter just as much as our daily schedules do. Over time, the people here have developed an almost instinctive ability to read the ocean. By looking at the color of the water, the direction of the clouds, or the movement of the waves offshore, they can often predict what the sea will be like for hours to come. It's knowledge passed down from one generation to the next, shaped by centuries of living alongside the ocean. And it's this deep understanding of the sea that has helped the community maintain life here for more than 200 years, in one of the most isolated places on Earth. The ocean doesn't just sustain Pitcairn physically, it has also helped shape a culture unlike any other. On Pitcairn, history isn't kept behind glass. It's woven into every family name, every story shared on a front porch, the way people greet one another each morning, and the narrow roads of Adamstown that nearly everyone has walked countless times. Stories of Pitcairn's ancestors are passed down from one generation to the next, told around family dinner tables, in classrooms, and at community gatherings. For the children growing up on the island, the HMS Bounty isn't some distant chapter in a history book, it's part of their own family story. Another unique part of Pitcairn's cultural identity is the Pitcairn language. It developed from a blend of 18th century English and Tahitian, gradually evolving on its own over generations. In everyday conversation, residents often move naturally between modern English and Pitcairn. To outsiders, some words may sound both familiar and strange at the same time, a reflection of the extraordinary history this community has lived through. Walking through Adamstown, visitors will come across a small church at the heart of the village. It's more than just a place of worship on Sundays. It's also a center of community life. Major holidays, weddings, baptisms, and memorial services all bring people together here. When there are only a few dozen residents, every gathering becomes an opportunity for the entire island to meet, talk, and strengthen the bonds that have held the community together for generations. Not far from the church lies the island's cemetery. Surrounded by green trees and the distant sound of waves, the gravestones, marked with familiar family names, tell the story of generations of Pitcairn residents. Every family has loved ones resting here, and because of that, the cemetery is more than a place of remembrance. It is a reminder that the story of this community has never truly been broken. Throughout the year, perhaps no day carries more meaning than Bounty Day. Held on January 23rd, the celebration commemorates the day the island's first settlers burned the HMS Bounty after arriving on Pitcairn. The entire community takes part in traditional activities, reenacts moments from the island's history, prepares a communal feast, and retells stories that have been passed down through generations. In a world where many local traditions are slowly fading under the influence of globalization, Pitcairn has managed to preserve an identity that remains distinctly its own. Its isolation, once seen as a burden, has unintentionally become a protective shell around cultural traditions that were formed more than 2 centuries ago. So how does a society of just 40 people sustain itself financially? The answer lies in a unique economic model, supported and subsidized to a significant extent from the outside. Surrounding Pitcairn is more than 840,000 square kilometers of ocean, protected within the Pitcairn Islands Marine Reserve, one of the largest marine protected areas in the world. The region is home to an almost untouched ecosystem. For the people of Pitcairn, the ocean is the most valuable resource they have. Tuna, wahoo, swordfish, and other ocean species provide a major source of food for residents, while some of the catch may be processed or sold to passing ships when the opportunity arises. What's remarkable is how deeply aware the people of Pitcairn are of the limits of this resource. They understand that if the ocean is depleted, they lose one of their most important sources of life. That's why overfishing is virtually non-existent here. Nature isn't seen as something to conquer, but as a partner to be protected for generations to come. Beyond the sea, the island's gardens also play an important role in sustaining daily life. The subtropical climate and abundant rainfall allow many fruit and vegetable crops to grow throughout the year. Nearly every family maintains a small garden filled with bananas, papayas, mangoes, citrus fruits, taro, and breadfruit. Much of the food is grown locally, reducing the community's dependence on supply ships that don't always arrive on schedule. One of Pitcairn's most famous products is honey. It's even been described as the liquid gold of the ocean. Pitcairn honey is regarded as some of the purest and finest honey in the world. The island's lack of pollution, the absence of agricultural chemicals, and the fact that its bees are free from many of the bacteria and parasites common elsewhere have made this honey exceptionally rare. For decades, Pitcairn's postage stamps have also become sought-after collectibles among stamp enthusiasts around the world, featuring images of the island, seabirds, the HMS Bounty, and scenes of local life. These limited edition stamps have generated a meaningful source of revenue for the island's administration. Tourism is another promising avenue, although the number of visitors each year remains very modest. The main reason is simple. Pitcairn's remoteness has kept it from becoming a popular tourist destination. Most people who make the journey are researchers, nature lovers, sailors, or travelers looking to experience one of the most isolated communities in the world. Meanwhile, most essential goods still have to be imported from abroad, and the island's budget continues to receive support from the United Kingdom to maintain basic public services. As the sun begins to rise above the horizon, Bounty Bay comes alive once again to the sound of small boat engines pulling away from shore. For the people of Pitcairn, this is when they head out to find the ingredients that will feed their families. The sea is the community's most important source of protein. After each fishing trip, the catch is usually cleaned and prepared as soon as it reaches shore to preserve its freshness. From there, it becomes part of a cuisine shaped by both Polynesian and British influences, the two cultures that have come together to define Pitcairn's identity. At family meals, it's easy to find traditional European recipes paired with the tropical ingredients of the Pacific. During festivals and community gatherings, the tables of Pitcairn become even more abundant, with every family contributing something of its own. There are no professional chefs or elegant restaurants, but every dish carries a story about the family that prepared it. One person brings freshly caught grilled fish, another brings homemade banana bread, someone else prepares a salad using vegetables from their garden, and the children help set the table. and serve food to everyone. Perhaps the most special thing about Pitcairn's food isn't the recipes themselves, but the way people come together to enjoy them. Meals are rarely just for one family. They're opportunities for neighbors to stop by and talk, for children to run around the yard, and for stories about the sea, the harvest, and their ancestors to continue passing from one generation to the next. Every meal is the result of hard work, nature's generosity, and the spirit of sharing that holds this tiny community together in the middle of the ocean. Yet behind the beauty of these simple moments lies a harsh reality that can mean the difference between survival and hardship. Unlike islands with deep water ports or sturdy breakwaters, Pitcairn has almost no natural conditions suitable for building a large harbor. The steep volcanic terrain, deep water close to shore, and powerful waves that roll in throughout the year make it impossible for cargo ships to dock directly. Every supply vessel must anchor offshore, while bringing people and goods onto the island depends entirely on small boats. That means the moment the sea turns rough, everything comes to a standstill. Even visitors who have traveled thousands of kilometers to reach Pitcairn may have to turn back if the waves are too dangerous to make landfall. This dependence is especially evident when it comes to healthcare. Pitcairn has a small medical center equipped with basic supplies and medication to meet everyday healthcare needs. But serious emergencies, such as heart attacks, major injuries, or cases requiring specialized surgery, cannot be treated on the island. If the weather is favorable and a suitable vessel is available nearby, the patient is transferred by boat to a ship offshore and then taken on a journey lasting several days to the nearest medical facility. If the sea is rough or no ship is available, they have no choice but to wait. It's an incredibly harsh reality. But perhaps Pitcairn's greatest challenge today is its people. The island's population has declined significantly over the decades. Many young residents leave to pursue education, careers, or greater opportunities in New Zealand or Australia. Some eventually return, but many choose to build new lives elsewhere. Fewer people means fewer hands available to repair roads, operate boats, maintain infrastructure, or keep public services running. A community that was already tiny now has to work even harder just to keep everyday life moving forward. Out beyond the island, the waves continue their endless journey, while the sky slowly fades from gold into deep blue. Tomorrow, the sun will rise once again over those same cliffs. The small boats will be lowered into the sea if the weather allows. Someone will tend the garden behind their home. Neighbors will stop by to check on one another, just as they have for generations. The outside world may continue to change at a dizzying pace, but Pitcairn will begin another day at its own familiar rhythm. Perhaps that's the real lesson we should carry with us when we leave this tiny island behind. Sometimes, the meaning of a place isn't measured by how many maps it appears on or how many visitors it welcomes each year. It's measured by something much simpler. After all the changes the world has gone through, there is still a place that people can call home. Not because it's the easiest place to live, but because it's the place they have never wanted to lose.